Hi everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I make videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. It's been a really hectic couple of weeks for me. I've been away at back-to-back textile shows, I've been restocking, I've been preparing for next year, and there's been very little time to stop and take a break, and I thought it was about time I did. So I thought today we could explore some slow stitch again and just have a little window of time that is just for us. Now, last time we looked at slow stitch for stress relief and looked at ways that we can use sewing as a way to calm down, to bring a little bit of peace into our busy lives. And I thought we could play around with that idea again, and this time look at ways that we can use sewing to help spark our creative flow. So that's what we're going to do today, a little bit of slow stitch, exploring ideas around creativity. So I'm going to follow a similar pattern to last time. I'm going to do a random pick from the magic bag, and then we're going to do a little exercise that you could do even today to help get those creative juices flowing. So gather all your bits and pieces and let's get stitching.
Well, you may remember this bag because we did our last slow stitch video from this, and I've got a piece of felt that is 10 centimetres by 13.5 centimetres, and we're going to do a lucky dip again. Now, last time I picked out the worst combination of fabrics I could have imagined, but we managed to create something that I think I quite liked. It ended up being really quite lovely, and we were looking last time at slow stitch for stress relief, so how to just stitch and use sewing as a way of relieving stress and tension. I thought we'd do something similar today, but we're going to focus on creativity today. So, how can we use slow stitch to stimulate our creativity, getting us thinking in creative ways? And so, let's start by picking our colours. Here we go, because we don't want any stress, we just want to let fate decide our colour scheme. So, I think we'll pick 3 again. Giving a route around. They're all stuck together. Can't get hold of one. I'm trying not to look because the bag is a little bit see-through. So here we go. Oh, we've got a deep red, very seasonal. Lovely. Trying to get a single piece because they are stuck together a little bit. Oh, I don't believe it. We've got brown again, and there is, just to be perfectly truthful, there are 2 stuck together, so I think we'll stick with that. They actually work quite well. So there we go. That's our 3 pieces. So we've got some cream felt in the background. We've got a red floral with bits of pink and a second red floral with bits of pink, much smaller scale floral, and then a brown gingham. I think that makes quite a nice combination of colours. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to get a neutral. I've got some offcuts of the felt as well, so that I think it works quite well. I'm going to get a neutral and some matching threads, and then we'll come back and start getting creative. Okay, let me show you what I've managed to find. So I said I was going to get some neutral. I've just gone into my scraps bin and I've found a couple of little bits of natural linen and a tiny scrap of scrim. I've been using this a fair amount in my Sunday videos. I really like the texture of it, so I thought I'd bring that in. I think because we're working with quite smooth fabrics, it's nice to find some ways to bring in different textures. So a little bit of felt that I've got over here and some more sort of rustic fabrics I think is going to help with that. I fished out a bunch of buttons, so I've focused on the green that comes up and the white background and the dark red. So I've just got a few of those. Then I've got some Sheepies Maxi Sweet Treat threads. So I've got my red, I've got a brown, an olive green, the pink. I've picked out the pink from here. It's fairly close, and neutral. This one's called linen. I use this all the time. And then I found a variegated pearl cotton, and this is a little DMC pearl cotton. It's quite matte, this one, which is unusual, and it's variegated as well. It's more pink than red. So then I've got 3 stranded cottons. I've got Anchor 926, which is a bit of a cream, Anchor 43, which is that dark red, and then I've picked out a green shade 264, and then finally I've got a tiny bit of this left. It's DMC 4518. I think this colour, it's Coloris thread, and I think this one's called Black Forest. It's got that lovely green, red, a brown, and then this pinky beige as well. Really like that one. You can see I use it a lot. There's not very much left. So what I'm going to do to start off with is divide up my backing felt. So this is just for me, really. This won't show. I'm going to split it in half. Got a bit of a dodgy ruler here with a chunk out of it, where I caught it with my rotary cutter, being careless and cutting along the wrong edge. So I've cut it in half. I want to find 1, 2.5. That's going to give me my quarter marks. So I'm just splitting it in half horizontally, and then I want to do the same vertically. You can just fold this if you want to. So I've got a limited colour palette, I've got limited materials. I'm not going to go beyond what's on my table here. I've got limited threads and limited embellishments, and what I'm going to try and do is find 16 different ways of using stitches. Now I'm also going to limit my stitch, and I'm going to limit myself to fly stitch and straight stitch. The task is to try and find as many variations as I possibly can. So this is forcing me to be a little bit creative, to think outside the box and find different ways of doing things. Let's cut a 2.5 cm strip out of each of the fabrics. So we can lay these out. Let's go 1, 2, 3, and we don't want any matching bits. That'll do. Don't want to think about it too much, otherwise it becomes too engineered. So we've got 4 of each fabric and 4 with the backing showing through. Right, I'm going to just tack those down really simply, and then I'll be back and we can start playing. So thought we could start with just some scraps, building up. Let's bring in some texture straight away. So I'm going to cut a scrap of scrim, like that, and then a little bit of the linen. Let's see how well this shows up. Oh, it's fine like that. So I'm just going to put some little scraps on there, and then I think we could have a button. let's put a red button on, and I'm going to secure it initially with just a straight stitch, so coming up through one hole, down through the other, and I can tie that off at the back. And I'm not going to cut my thread because I think let's put some stitching around it as well. So we'll start with a running stitch on this one. I'm not going to be too fussy about it, but I'm just going to go around the edge of that scrim. Don't pull too tight because everything will pucker up. That's the only downside of running stitch, is that if you pull hard your fabric will gather, and you might not want that. Sometimes it's exactly what you want, sometimes it's definitely not. So I might not be able to see these stitches particularly, but just going to hold everything in place, and you could always go back in with another colour and put another line of stitch if you wanted to. I'm kind of loosely using the weave of the scrim to guide where my stitches are going, but this is a super simple one. So that's my first one, and I can pull out any loose threads out of the scrim if I want to. But that's my first one's like a little, I suppose it's a bit like a postage stamp, just a button and some simple scraps of fabric. So that's the first one. Let's do just some lines of fly stitch. So we'll do this as fly stitch that's all in a line, normal fly stitch. So I've come up on the left, I'm going to hop horizontally across to the right and pull through to make a loop, and then I'm going to come up in between those 2 points a little way down, pull through, and that catches the loop on my working thread, pulls it into a V, and then I'm going to put a little straight stitch, so straight down and then up again on the left. If you're not sure about fly stitch, I have got loads of stitch tutorial videos, and I did cover it in my F Stitches stitch alphabet video. I'll link it at the top of the screen for you, because I know this thread is a little bit tricky to see on this fabric. So we'll just put some lines of fly stitch on this one, so it'll look a little bit organic. You could put a little bead at the top of each and make it look like flowers if you wanted to. So I'm really trying hard not to think too much about this. I'm just letting inspiration strike. Let's get some variegated red, I think, and I want a bit that's got variegation on it, so I'm going to cut it there. Sometimes you have to be a bit strategic with variegated threads, because sometimes the variegations don't come very quickly. I'm going to make these stitches a lot smaller than the previous ones, so I haven't got a very good needle here, I don't think, but I think it's more like a tapestry needle. I don't think it's especially sharp, so we'll see how we go, and if I need to get a different needle I will. So teeny tiny ones now. Well, they could be teeny tinier, but I'm not going to unpick anything. think that's a rule that you can set yourself with slow stitch pieces, is ban unpicking, because they're not supposed to be perfect. They're supposed to be just enjoyable. So the process should be where the fun comes, not the precision. And it's hard if you are a bit, I'm a real perfectionist with my embroidery, so it's got to look right. Can you see how that's variegated as it's gone down? I will bring it up to the camera in a minute. So I find it really hard to not be super precise and have everything immaculately neat. I find that really challenging. But something like this I find very helpful. Okay, there's my first two. So I've got my scrappy button with my running stitch around it, and that's some lines of fly stitch in different threads. So I thought this one, we've done fly stitch in different threads, let's do running stitch in different threads as well. So I'm just going to do rounds of running stitch. You could do lines if you wanted to, but I thought we could go around the outside and work to the centre, just so that it's not the same as the last one. So we're always going to be looking for a point of difference. How can we make the next one different to the last one? Okay, I've got my running stitch one done, and I've put a cross in the centre because it's a rectangle rather than a square. There was that long thin section. I'm wondering, I feel like I need some red in the centre, so if I just go back in with my red variegated, I can put a small vertical cross over the top, and that just adds something a little bit different, balances it out maybe a little bit. So now I've used a cross stitch, I think maybe that's what I should do in the next box. So let's just fill it with loads of cross stitches, overlay them. Some can be sort of X cross stitches, and then I could do some that are vertical. So I'm allowing the ideas for one box to inform the next box. So that's where my idea has come from. Filling the centre of the previous box with a cross has put cross stitches in mind, so they're still straight stitches, nothing different, there's no other kind of stitch, I'm just overlaying two straight stitches diagonally, and I'm just going to run out the thread, so it'll be what it'll be. There's no embellishment on this one, no fabric, this is just the backing felt that I'm working on, and as usual using far too much of the thread. Got a little bit of this lighter green left, so I can bring some of that in. So I think creativity and finding ways to spark your creative processes is really important, and I've heard many times from many people in my life how they're not creative, and I fundamentally disagree. I think I've landed on the idea that every human being is fundamentally creative. It's built into us, and you might disagree, but I know I'm right on this one. What I would agree with, perhaps, is that you've lost touch with that creative part of yourself. That I think I can probably understand. But if you look at any child, you do not have to teach them how to be creative. If you've ever had young children in your life, you'll know that they will pick up a stick and it'll be a magic wand, or it'll be a gun, or it'll be a sword, or it'll be 101 different things other than a stick, and they can imagine and create a reality out of nothing. Children don't need, on the whole, to be encouraged to pick up a pen and start drawing, and they can make marks on a piece of paper and see all manner of things in it. And we know that in terms of skill, often that there is very little there because they don't have the observation skills and the fine motor skills to produce something convincing and realistic. But to them, whatever they create is exactly what it's meant to be. It's exactly what it's supposed to look like, and children tend to be very proud of what they've created and will want you to put it on the fridge and show it off and show it to the grandparents and things like that. So somewhere along the line, that inner critic creeps in and starts telling us that we're not good enough to celebrate our work, that we're not creative, and we compare ourselves to people and notice where we fall short. And so that often leads to that creative part of us just shriveling up and never finding expression. And I think it's so sad, and one of the reasons why I started Feather Stitch House and why I make these videos is to help you, to help as many people as I can get back in touch with that creative part of themselves. So we make kits because that often, for many people, makes that creative process really easy, because the kit is there, the sort of design is done for you, and you can follow someone else's instructions and make something and engage with creativity without there being too much risk. And I know for me, I had many years where I didn't really do anything particularly creative or particularly artistic, I should say. That's probably a better description. But it was doing kits and following other people's projects and things like that that helped me find my way back. And once I'd reignited that creative spark, there was no going back. And I want to be able to share that with the world, really, as many people as I can. So we have to learn to turn off the voice of that critic, and we have to relearn how to take risks and how to celebrate our work and be willing to share it, because there's merit in everything we create. Sometimes we won't be happy with it, but we will have learnt something really important through the process. So I think there are lots of reasons why activities like this are so important, particularly for adults, and I would even argue particularly for women who society judges so harshly. We often feel less than and not good enough, and so I think it's really important that we reclaim that and learn to play again, take all the pressure off and just learn to play. So I hope these videos help you. I really like that one. It's just really simple. Cross stitches laid over each other. Started with the darkest one so the lighter tones build up over the top. Really like it. I've put in some cream thread there as well. Let's go over here. I've worked on the top. I'm just going to go to this one and let's just do the same again but with some detached fly stitches. So these could go in whatever direction you like. I'm just clustering up some detached fly stitches and I'm just going to do the same process again with a different stitch. Super simple. Okay, there's my overlaid fly stitch. Use some of the pink thread here and some more of this variegated. I got a bit that had some variegation on it, and just so that you can see it up close, that's the cross stitch one. So these are both stitched with stitches line over each other, and that made me start thinking about what would happen if they were woven into each other, and that made me think about needle weaving. So I'm going to do this other, oh maybe I can do it on, yeah, let's do it on this brown one here, and that will help us stay straight as well. So I'm just going to do a long straight stitch and then come back a little bit. I can use the pattern on the fabric to guide me, and then I'm gonna hop along up that section a little bit and go back across, and I'm just going to work my way up the panel like that. Careful not to pull too tight, you don't want it to gather up. Let's go with this variegated one. Let's see what sort of colour blend we can get. I do love this thread. So I'm going to take 2 strands of this, and let's start at the outside edge. So I'm going to just bring my thread through just outside of that first line, and then I'm going to go over that one, under the next one, over and then under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over and under, and pull through like that, and then I am going to go through to the back, and then I'm going to come along a little way, and then we're going to do the reverse. So I went under this one on the last pass, so I'm going to start by going over it, and then I go under the next one, over, under, over. So all the stitches that I went under on my way up, I'm now going over, and all the stitches I went over, I'm now going under, and I'm going to pull that through and just scooch it along a little bit so that it's straight, and then down through to the back. So it's not going to totally cover up the fabric, and it's not going to be a completely solid fill. There's going to be gaps, but I quite like that. So I went under, so this time I'm going over, under, over, under. So we just look at the last line that we stitched and we do the opposite. And I'm sliding my needle backwards and forwards. It helps me avoid catching the fabric and the threads as well with my needle, because I want these woven lines to be free. Really like that woven effect. I think that's really good. Actually, let's do this one here, because I was going to use a button. I don't want two buttons directly under each other, so let's pick, that one's quite dark on there, maybe we need, yeah, let's use this one. And I'm just going to pop it in the centre. Let's use fly stitches to stitch it on. So I'll come up at the edge, I'm going to go back down at the edge, and then I can come up through the hole and catch that loop, and I can either go back down the same hole or I can hop across diagonally like that, and then I can do the next hole, so up at the edge, down at the edge. I haven't really got enough thread here, but up through the hole and then across diagonally, and I think I'll finish off my thread. So we've got fly stitches attaching our button here, so it's quite a good one for buttons with 4 holes. So we've used our fly stitches, and let's add just some radiating fly stitches around the edge. Now we can play around with these, so we can do a few with that have got quite small V's at the top. Working in from the edge of my rectangle of fabric, keeping those little V's quite small. So I've got some pink in here. Let's do some shallower fly stitches now. So I suppose this is kind of layering up again, but we're working in radial now. So they're overlapping a little bit. And let's do some really long thin ones. I've got my cream thread here. So now I'm just looking for some gaps. Places to just pop the fly stitches that I'm adding now. So anywhere there's a bit of a gap, just popping in a long thin fly stitch with quite a deep V. Let's try, we haven't had a green button. Let's put a green button here, and I am going to just do a cross stitch in the middle of this one. So just using the thread that's still in my needle. What shall I do? Let's do some running stitch circles around it. I just didn't want to do another one too similar directly below it, but I wanted the button to show up. So let's just do some running stitches around the button. So stitching around buttons in different ways. Do you know, I think I'm going to keep going. Let's have this one all pink. I just quite like the subtlety around that dark green button. I think it's working really well. So I'm just going to work my way around to the outside. Okay, this one is getting on my nerves. I didn't tack down that side and it's curling up, so I thought we could do that next, and I wanted to do something similar to this, but let's do some circles instead. So let's just draw around a button as it's here. Not the most circular circle I've ever seen, but we'll manage. What have I got? Here we go. Will that fit in? It'll be alright. Just going to pop a pin. And we haven't done anything on diagonals. We've done some cross stitch, but let's do a running stitch across the diagonal. So I'm just laying my thread from corner to corner, and I've just put a couple of marks just to help keep me on track. Okay, for this one I thought we could use the pattern on the fabric again, a little bit like we did here, and I really love this one. I think it came out really nicely, and so thought we could put some little cross stitches on the overlaps. So just using the pattern of the fabric to guide our stitching, and I finished off with some light green thread. I'm just carrying on with what's in my needle. Okay, here we go. That's my little cross stitch one. I really like that. I think these ones are looking really nice where we've used the pattern of the fabric. Having fun. Right, I wanted to do one with a button again. So I'm just going to draw around it. You could put the button on if you wanted to, because we're going to use negative space. And another version of straight stitch is seed stitch, and I've got my variegated thread here. I love variegated thread with seed stitch because it just changes gradually as you're going. So I'm going to seed stitch everywhere but in that circle. So seed stitch is just lots of running stitches stitched in random directions, and gradually they fill the space and create a kind of patchy fill, so you get plenty of colour and plenty of stitch, but you get to see the colour of whatever's underneath showing through. So we've used these fabricless ones to sort of showcase just stitches. We've got fly stitch here, we've got cross stitch here, so let's put some seed stitch on this one and just create some texture, but we're just going to avoid stitching inside that circle. So do you see how the colour changes with this variegated thread? So I really do love doing seed stitch with a variegated thread. I think it creates such a wonderful effect. So kind of using the button, we're using that circular shape, it's echoing around our little bit of our little panel here, but not doing anything more than once. So that's the challenge of this one, trying to keep it varied, imagining up different ways of stitching the same shape. Let's come down to this one here, or shall I do this one? Let's do this one. I'm going to put a button in. Let's start with a button. Quite like that one. So I've got a 4-hole button here, and I'm going to put it so that I'm doing a vertical cross across the middle. And I want to do something similar to this one here, but with straight stitches. So I'm going to do a bit of a starburst. I really like doing this. This features in lots of the slow stitch pieces I've done over the years. So I'm just going to do some radiating straight stitches, and like we've done before, I'm going to layer them up. So different threads, different thicknesses of thread. This one's quite a chunky thread that I'm using here. But just radiating out as if they were coming out of the button. You could take the button away if you wanted to after doing this, but I'm just going to leave mine in. So it could be another negative space one if you wanted it. Doesn't have to be mega even. So I'm just working my way around, inside to outside and then outside to inside, and that saves me doing double lengths of thread, like the full length of the stitch on the front and the back. So in this one we've done stitches on their own. I've done lots of straight stitches. I thought I could try a fly stitch, and I thought we could have a play with thread thickness. So I've got a single strand of stranded cotton here, and I'm going to do my first line in just a single strand. This is going to be a bit of a sampler where we see the effect of different thread weights. So that's a line of fly stitch with a single strand. I'm going to go next to it now and do 2 strands. So this is all going to be in one colour. You could overlay some other colours if you wanted to, but I'm just going to stick with this one. And you might find that you need to make your stitches a bit bigger as you go through because the thread is going to take up more space. The thicker it gets, the harder it is to be dainty, so you just want to make room for your stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 6 strands filling that space. So we can look at how the stitch changes with different numbers of thread, different thread weights. Getting close to the end now, I've only got 3 left. So let's do a bit of a silly one, and we can put it on this one here because I think it's going to show up best. So I've got here all the thread ends that I've been putting to one side as I've been going along, and I'm just going to put them in a bundle on top of that fabric like that. And I've got a bit of my fine pink variegated. I don't want to totally obstruct the fabric, so let's make sure there's a bit showing through, and I'm just going to put some straight stitches and hold those in place. So just all the little scraps of thread. And you can stitch this as much as you like. You can leave it really wild, or you can tame it a little bit with the way that you stitch it down. So I'm just catching my thread ends in there. You could sort of ease them into a shape if you wanted to. We've used scrim and linen on this dark red fabric a couple of times, so let's do that again. So I'm just going to cut a piece that's roughly the same size as my rectangle, and I'm just going to catch that down here and there with a little bit of running stitch or invisible baste. Now, this may work or it may not, but I'm not going to unpick it, so I'm going to agree that with you ahead of time because it might go terribly wrong. So I've just covered up that red fabric. I'm going to take away any really wildly loose fibres like that, and I wondered what would happen if we cut away a circle. So we want one Let's go with this one. It's quite hard to see sometimes. On screen because it's such an open weave. So this is kind of a reverse applique that we're doing here. So I'm just going to backstitch around that circle that I've just drawn, just with this thread that I've got in my needle. I don't want my stitches to be too big because I want them to cover plenty of ground, but if I make them too small I won't be catching all of the fibres. So these stitches have got to do something. And then I'm going to take my scissors in and cut just inside that line of backstitch that I've just sewn. Cutting away the scrim from the centre. I can tidy it up, just want it mostly out of the way. So we've made a little eyelet there. There we go. I think it probably would have looked better if I'd done it with the linen, but I didn't, so it is what it is. Let's fray up the edges a little bit. Maybe make it a little bit more jazzy. There we go. That'll do. It's not my favourite, I'll be honest, but it doesn't matter. This is just playful experimentation. There we go. So I could put some more stitching on there if I wanted to, but I think I'll leave it at that one. So what do we put in this one? I think we're going to do some fly stitches, a little bit like this but more even. So I'm just going to mark a central point like that. That'll do. Actually, we haven't had any olive for a while, have we, down here? We've got no olive thread. We haven't used any on either of these two rows, so let's bring some olive in. So let's start with north, south, east and west. So I'm going to do a long fly stitch, short stem, and then I can go out to the side. Again, I'm using the fabric to guide me a little bit. So I hope you can see that a little bit. That's 4 long fly stitches. Let's get some of this red that I haven't used for a while as well, as I've got some right there. And now we can come in on the diagonals. So there's one. I've got a little bit of pink left in my needle here, so let's make use of it and just put a straight stitch in each of those V's. So there we go, slow stitch for creativity. We've broken our backing piece up into 16 little squares, and using just 2 stitches and a limited colour palette, we've tried to fill each of those squares in a different way. So let me bring it up nice and close so that you can see. So we've got a couple of buttons in there, and we've just used straight stitches and fly stitch to create as many different surfaces and textures and arrangements as we can. And I find little exercises like this really useful. I probably got halfway through fine and then really started struggling for ideas, and it's pushed me to think of different ways of using the stitches, different ways of using the buttons, different ways to create texture. And before I know it, I've now got a little sampler of loads of different ideas that I can then come back to when I'm slow stitching and maybe incorporate into future work. So I hope you've enjoyed that and found it useful. I'd really love to see what you come up with. If you are posting on Instagram, just tag me at Feather Stitch House, and I'm then much more likely to see your creations. So I hope you've enjoyed that little slow stitch project. I hope that gives you loads of ideas of things that you can do in your own work. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you again soon in another video. Happy stitching. Take care. Bye.